TypeScript also has something called literal types. You've probably heard me say this a few times already, but let me explain what they are. Like we can have a type like string, and here we can have TypeScript, we can have Python, we can have CSS, we can have different forms of strings, but you can also specify a literal string as a type. What that means is instead of saying let course is string, you can instead say let course is TypeScript. This is a literal string type, and the literal is coming from the fact that this is literal. So now when we pass CSS, this doesn't work. When we pass Python, even if Python is a string, it also doesn't work. We still have this error which says type Python is not assignable to type TypeScript. But now when we change this to TypeScript, you can see everything works fine. And this also works for numbers. We can say let spacing. If we say this should be a number, well, spacing can be 50, can be 10, can be 5, can be any number. But once we say 40, then we have a literal number type. An error here, type 5 is not assignable to type 40. But when we make this 40, everything is fine. Now you're probably thinking, why would you want to have literal types? Well, literal types can be very useful when you want to narrow the acceptable types for a variable. What I mean by this is, here like we saw, if you have course to be string, it means you can have different forms of strings. But then it's also possible you don't want just any string, but you want to have like few strings. Then we can use unions with literal types. So here we can say TypeScript or Python or CSS. And now if we should say course is equals to Python, everything is fine. If I said course is equals to CSS, we get suggestions again, that's nice. But then when you say course equals to Java, okay, now you have an error because Java is not assignable to type TypeScript, Python, and CSS. Let me show you another example where this is nice. Let's say we have our user type again, and we have this user. Let's say you want to access a specific key in this object. Now we're just going to call this a string. I'm just going to pass a key called not exists. And then I'll try to get the value for that key. Now, because we don't have a not exist key here, this is going to be undefined. But then you can also say that instead of just accepting any string as the key, you only want to accept the keys that are here. So what you can do is we can have a type alias. We'll call this key, and then this is going to be a union of literal types. So it's going to be name, age, hobbies, address. And then instead of saying the key should be a string, we can say that the key should be key. So when we use not exist, you can see we have an error. Not exist is not assignable to type key. But then when we pass name here, everything is fine. Age, everything is fine. Hobbies, everything is fine. Address, everything is fine. Addresses, we have an error here again.